Jim, I always thought of technology as something that shouldn't be political or partisan, but certainly in the last few days and weeks, it's become partisan. All of our largest tech companies seem to be caught up more in debates about politics than about their technology.
And it's a little scary because Facebook, Twitter, and now YouTube have combined to basically shut up the president of the United States. They've banned him from their networks. They banned him from his major way of communicating with the public, and the power that they have is scary.
You've got to look at a couple of things. I mean, one, they did it for good reason. I mean, the president was using these platforms to incite insurrection, so he was violating the terms and conditions of that they set out for all users. Two, this is not a First Amendment issue, as some Republicans have made it out to be. This is not the government restricting people's speech. It's a private company enforcing its own rules and policies, and that's something that that private companies do all the time. Thirdly, I'm not going to shed any crocodile tears for the president losing his access to the public. He can stand in front of a microphone and send out a press release at any time, and he'll get an audience of millions of people instantly.
Obviously they had a lot of justification for what they did. Still, the power that they showed, 3 people, Mark Zuckerberg, the head of Twitter and the head of Google, have the power to close public forums where billions of people come to get their news and cast somebody out. You could say it's justified this time, but how about next time? How about if the next CEOs of this company, Dorsey and Zuckerberg, if the next CEOs are people more like Donald Trump, who are a bit demagogic, think of the power that they would command.
I would suggest the market would sort that out. I think if you had a demagogue using Facebook for blatantly political purposes, it would so alienate people that their business would go down the tubes. Advertisers would start boycotting them. They'd lose billions of dollars in value just like that. I'm not too worried about that scenario, because I think the next CEO of Facebook and Twitter will also be good capitalists as well as as kind of guardians of speech. I think they really mean what they say when they say free speech is in their best interests.
Well, I hope you're right, but I fear that you might be wrong, because the people who are on Twitter and Facebook might not know what they're missing. They might not know who's been censored and who's been quiet. This is, largely speaking, not a crowd that would otherwise go to the New York Times or to the Post-Dispatch website. They get their news from Facebook.
No, but there certainly are a lot of alternative sources of news, and then you have to say, if you're going to do something, but what are you going to do about it? There's an antitrust case just filed last month where the government is seeking to break up Facebook. I think it's a very weak case. They're basically trying to undo 2 mergers that the federal government approved back in 2012 and 14 of Instagram and WhatsApp. I think that's a very dangerous remedy, but I think the case for it is weak.
Well, actually, under current antitrust law, the case for it is weak. But we ought to change the law, because these organizations have too much power, and they should be broken up. It's not only their command of the public forum that we worry about. It's their effect on business and the consumer. For instance, if you take
how are they hurting the consumer? They give their product away for free. They create probably thousands of dollars in value for consumers, and and consumers are not paying a steep price for it.
Well, here's a way that they can indirectly hurt the consumer. For instance, if I am a business owner and I want to sell to this market, the Facebook and Google basically have a monopsony power, not a monopoly power. They don't control the supply, but they control the demand. The demand is in those billions of consumers that are using Facebook and Google. And in order to reach those consumers, these businesses have to go through Facebook and Google. I mean, they can.
Well, you're talking about the market for advertising, right?
For advertising, exactly.
There are probably millions of websites on the web that sell advertising. You just named two large ones. There's also Amazon. There's Twitter. There are many. The market for advertising is very competitive. So competitive that indeed the price for internet advertising keeps going down.
Well, 60% of all advertising, all online advertising, goes through Google and Facebook. Mm-hmm. And you throw Amazon, and I don't know what you get, but you have a duopoly, a triopoly. I don't know, but I think it's anti-competitive.
Well, there's no evidence of consumer harm. There's no evidence that even the businesses buying ads are being harmed. Because again, the price is they're not charging monopolist prices. The price is very competitive.
Well, here's another instance of consumer harm. If you look at what they've done, they bought up WhatsApp, they bought up Instagram, they bought up the other Google bought up YouTube, and they have such power now that nobody is able to compete with them. You have Snapchat.
I wouldn't say nobody. One of the hottest social media sites in recent years is TikTok, which happens to be owned by a Chinese company, and the Trump administration doesn't like that. Tried to ban it at one point. I would suggest that if the government tries to break up our successful companies like Facebook, the void will be filled by China or companies from some other nation.
So our choice is to deal with the monopsonists or give all the data to the Chinese, which the Chinese government can get whenever it wants. So I think if you made Facebook get rid of WhatsApp, if you made YouTube become independent from Google, if you broke up these things, they would start to compete with each other much better. Somebody would try to be a social media. That's
why this antitrust case is so weak. There's no evidence that those companies, when Facebook bought them, had a viable long-term business model. They were losing money. They didn't want to. The previous management didn't want to adopt Facebook-like tactics, such as selling targeted ads based on data about the users. In fact, the heads of both Instagram and WhatsApp left Facebook after the deal because they disagreed with the way Facebook was making them profitable and successful. It's hard to build that case that those particular companies were the sort of the anti-Facebook.
Of course, we don't know, and because Facebook now owns.
But you can't win an antitrust case based on hypotheticals.
Well, we're all dealing with hypotheticals. These mergers were in 2010 and 2012 when Facebook itself was a much smaller part of the market. I think if the antitrust people in the government had realized what was about to happen, they would never have approved it. Well,
regulators can't see the future. They have to decide the case based on the evidence at the time, and I think those were properly decided, and to go back on those decisions now would be a dangerous precedent. Would send a chilling effect throughout the technology community, including like the venture capitalists who finance new tech companies. The next new social media app might not be able to get funding in this country if selling to Facebook or Twitter isn't a possible exit strategy.
Well, who's going to fund one of them now when you have these big monsters that have to compete against these people snap their fingers and compete with them and put them have so much market share on everything else that they could
Oh,
basically wipe out
I
the
read
little
an
guy.
item recently about a guy from St. Louis who had created a social media app, sold it to Twitter. Those kind of folks are getting funding all the time based on the hope that they can be successful enough, they'll get the attention of the big guys.
And if he not had sold it to Twitter, Twitter would have used its clout to wipe it out by imitating, which these companies have done anyway.
Not necessarily. I mean, if Twitter liked something about the technology or the people, it was in their interest to buy it. They actually did shut this particular site down. They wanted the technology more than the customer base, I guess. But
well, if we get back to the public forum again, if you broke those things up, you have Snapchat, Instagram, YouTube separate. You certainly have more independent public forums in which people can post ideas, even if they're videos, if they're social messages, and you don't have, 3 people controlling the public forums for the United States with the ability to kick anybody out that they don't like.
Well, they are not kicking anybody out who they don't like. They're kicking out people who violate the terms and conditions of the sites, and I think they take those measures very. I mean, there are people calling for Twitter to ban Trump, for years, and they didn't do it until his tweets, helped incite an insurrection. I think that was, very cautious management on the part of Twitter.
True, they have good management now, but we don't know about the next guy. Suppose a few years ago, a real estate developer, Donald Trump, said, "I'm going to invest in Facebook and I'm going to take control." And suppose he was running it now.
You can't make
what would that look like?
You can't make policy based on wild hypotheticals. That would be a recipe for disaster. People would never know what they could invest in and what's safe from arbitrary government policies. The one thing that I do think we've learned in the last week is these companies are going to be political creatures from now on. There's no escaping it. For better or worse, they're going to have to consider the political impact of their businesses.
Yeah, and if you look at Zuckerberg and Dorsey, they've been trying for the last couple of years not to be political, to stay neutral, to stay, defending the freedom of speech. But Trump has just dragged them right in and down, I think.